Welcome back to the Tea and a Buddy podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Erica.
And following on from our previous episode, we're going to be talking about things that weren't taught in history class in America.
Yes.
Or the USA, more specifically.
I think
U.S. history not taught.
Yeah. U.S. history not taught in school, basically. Yeah. And I'm, again, like we said on Tuesday, I don't know if the things that I'm going to mention are now taught in school.
Yeah, I mean, we've been out of school now for 400 years. So it's...
It feels like it sometimes. No, like you and I were talking on Tuesday, and I know you were really struggling to think, like, what was I taught in school?
What was I taught in school? I remember Victorians, and I remember King Henry VIII. Everything else was just...
No, you remembered a lot more than I did. You know, I was sitting here
when I was looking up stuff, I was jogged. My memory was jogged, but I do remember my very first history lesson at Torquay Community College, which is now Torquay Academy in Torbay, England. Mm-hmm. Remember the very first history lesson, it was like the first page was 1066 and the Norman Conquest.
I seem to think, and you can remember more than I can, but I seem to think that when I was in elementary school, we were taught what's called social studies.
Yeah.
So it's sort of just
studies.
general.
Yeah, I think that's like a college thing.
Oh, really?
In Britain, when I went to college, which is kind of the same thing as, well, it's not really. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing as university over here. Mm. But it's not. There's college and then there's university.
It's a little bit.
It's like
more
a stepping stone
to like community
further education,
kind of, or like just I seem to think we started off with social studies, which was just like general kind of history.
Yes,
just like generic history.
I think we just used to call it history. This is in primary school now, right?
Yeah. And I can't remember what grade we started, but I think, if my memory serves me, which, you know, doesn't mean a lot, that we started with, when we started doing, like, history, we'd had Texas history first.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was, like, U.S. history. And then world history. And some of these might have lasted for more than one school year. World history. And then I remember taking in high school...
And was world history... Was it just considered it's a small world after all? It's a small world after all.
It was basically, we had world history, and then we had this class called humanities in high school.
Humanities is that's the history and geography department.
And it was similar to, geography. I seem to think we took geography instead of history one year. Like that was in place of history classes, geography. That was like a whole year unto itself.
And geography to you, what was it about? Was it about countries and continents and stuff?
Yeah. We did the seven continents. I don't remember really having to learn too many countries. We had to learn all of the states. We had to learn rivers and mountain ranges.
And that was just it, the names of it, right?
The seas. No, yeah, we had to remember that. I mean, we had to learn the names, but I can't remember
that was about it. That was the extent of it. Because in secondary school, for me, geography we didn't learn anything about like Africa or Asia or the Americas or anything like that. It was all arable farming and intensive farming and oxbow lakes and rivers and it's stuff like that. Basically,
that's more like geology, isn't it, rather than geography?
No, it's like the geography of the land. Yeah, is what of your land. You know, like why rivers form a Y shape and why others don't. That kind of thing. Yeah, no, I remember it. So, and what the effects of arable and intensive farming on, and define an oxbow lake.
Doesn't that seem more like geology though?
Oh yeah. No, well, geology's got nothing to do with arable farming or anything.
Well, geology is about the actual land and the makeup rocks. Of the
Yeah, but no, apparently that was because geography. Yeah, it's like the geographical aspects of it all. There was
Trust.
nothing about like, there was never like a pop quiz of like, what's the capital of Canada?
Oh no, yeah,
You
we
know,
had to do all the capitals and all
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, not the. I don't remember learning countries. I don't remember ever having to learn the countries.
I mean,
like, I remember the kind of something like, oh, there's too many countries. You don't have to, you don't
too
have
many
to remember all
countries, and
those.
only one matters, and that's
We just had to do the continents and the oceans and the seas and all of that kind of stuff. Anyway,
yeah.
we're getting off the top.
We kind of spun off into a geography topic there. You see, you're getting your money's worth on this podcast.
Oh my lord. Anyway, yeah, so world history / humanities was basically the history, probably all the same kind of stuff that you learned up until the formation of America. And then once we started talking about like
we skipped
America
all that
became
period.
America became a country, then from then on we did not learn about what was happening in the rest of the world.
Well, that was it. It was
Genuinely.
it was just American history.
Yeah, I do not remember, like, once America was formed and we were here, I don't remember ever learning again about anything that was
Land of our
happening
Pilgrim's Pride.
in the world, you know, from the 1700s onwards. Like, we did not talk about the rest of the world, what was happening.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of American history that I've learned, like, through television, through film, through just conversations, through reading, obviously, which, I mean, I guess is what they assume is going to happen as you get older anyway.
Yes, I think curriculum, and especially now today, they're focusing more on, like, maths and reading. We've got to get, in America maybe, I don't know if they're doing it in Britain too or around the world, but it seems like that from what we've experienced, From what we've seen, anyway, it's more maths and reading, and maybe a little bit of science. Just focus on them. Social studies, they don't really care. They don't really need to know history, and they don't really need to know where they are or what happened.
Well,
and
when
why
I was
this is the way
when
it
I was
is.
researching some of the like major American history events that are generally not taught in school, someone put this really thoughtful, I didn't save it, but someone put this really thoughtful comment on a Quora post where they were just talking about the fact that, and I completely agree, that when we are kids learning history, that we're taught these historical events as singular events. Like, we learn them, this event began, it happened, and then it ended, and then that's it, and then we go on to the next event, and they don't teach these things as like cause and effect.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're learning these events in school, and it just seems like really dry because you're not taught how to put it together in context of the larger picture, and
no.
And also it would help if we were also talking about, things that are happening in Asia and how that affects what's happening over here, or things that are happening over here and how that affects what's happening in Europe or whatever,
So you don't need to worry about that. Just keep making money.
Because all of that, because all of that stuff helps to paint the larger picture and makes it more interesting, but also makes you be able to understand it better. And I love history. I love it. But like in school,
she loves her genealogy.
I was quite okay at history in school, but I didn't love it.
Terrible.
I didn't love it though. And like, I can't imagine now being the me, the version of myself that I am now. I can't imagine how I didn't like it in school. Like, I feel really sad that I didn't enjoy it more and get more out of it in school, because
it was probably because of the way it was taught.
Because
it was stuffy.
It was
stuffy. It's like I had an English teacher, right, and I didn't really care for English all that much. English literature, language, or anything like that. But the teacher I had in secondary school he was like obsessed with it. He was like, he loved it, and he used to jump on the tables and get us all excited. It's like, if only my history teacher had been like that. He was a little bit of a fuddy-duddy.
Yeah.
He was just a bit, gotta teach this history now.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this is what we're talking about. Francis Drake, Spanish Armada, let's go, you know?
Yeah.
And I was okay, yeah. And then I do actually remember him getting him on a rant about Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
It was one day, stuck out in my memory, I guess. He went on a rant about Vietnam, about the US going to Vietnam, and the US saying, oh, well, there was no way to win, you know, because it wasn't like, it was the Vietnam War, and it was like America didn't win that war, you know?
Yeah.
It's like it didn't conquer Vietnam. You know?
Right.
Vietnam is not US now, you know.
Right.
There's no way to win. It's like, oh no, and he was going on a rant about it. He wasn't, I don't know why, really. He just kind of went off on one. It was like, oh, they always say, oh, there was no way to... But you found it
interesting the way he was...
Yeah, he was kind of getting really impassioned about it. It was like, yeah, and I mean, he doesn't, you know, it was that and Wrexham football team. It was like Wrexham football team, you know, it was like...
Yeah.
Nothing historically amazing about them, really.
Yeah. Yeah, the teacher makes
Except
all the
for
difference.
people who are fans of them, you know.
I mean, luckily in high school, I had a lot of really good teachers. I went to quite a good school, and I had a lot of teachers like that who were just really passionate about the subject they were teaching.
Yeah.
And so it does help to get you more into that subject. That being said, American schools are very political without realizing it, without meaning to be. They're run in a political manner. Like the curriculum is decided upon by the government. You know, they have school boards, and they have, you know, so they all get together and they go, oh no, strike this. They don't need to know about this. This is more important. We want to angle this occasion in history to make us look as good as possible.
Well, yeah, that's the same with British curriculum too, you know.
Yeah, and so it's very cherry-picked what we get to learn about, what we don't. I mean, you were listing the things you remembered learning about. I don't really remember learning about. I mean, obviously the revolution is huge. Slavery is a huge chunk of what you learn about, and then it seems like we went from there to the Civil War.
Well, it's like that with Elizabeth the First, and then it was like 200 years of history just gone, and I mean, in between that and the Victorian era was the American War of Independence, Revolution, and other stuff, George III's madness, you know, all that kind of stuff. It was like briefly touched upon, there was a bunch of kings and queens, that's the end. Now we go straight to Victoria because of the Industrial Revolution and how great Britain was coming up with Isambard Kingdom Brunel, built all these railway stations and railways and trains, and yes, we were the forefront of like exporting around the world.
I don't even remember learning about like
industry wouldn't have survived without Britain, and you know, top hats and everything. You know.
I'm sure we must have. American history, I don't really remember learning a lot about, except for the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, basically all the wars that we were involved in, and then also like the Civil Rights Act. And I don't really remember a whole lot beyond that. I can remember like before that we learned about the Renaissance and the Byzantine Empire and the
Byzantine.
The Greeks and the Romans and all of that.
Well, it was the Roman Empire, then the Byzantine Empire.
Yeah.
Then it was the Ottoman Empire.
I'm not doing them in order. Calm down. But it seems like I remember like learning a lot about that kind of stuff and not so much American history for some reason. Like only like the biggest events in American history, which seems weird because you would think that in a school system that is governed by, you know, politicians, basically, that they would want to especially focus on American history. But
well, American history, I mean, you know, as you said, like, it's main that the two major events are the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. And
those take up a lot of time learning about those. Slavery, we learned all about all of that. You know?
It's like, you know, but that's it then. After that, it's just like, oh, you know.
Yeah.
Other things, too.
I mean, the First World War, not so much.
The Second World War.
The Second World War, yeah.
I mean, that's only really because of the Normandy invasion and everything, and that's kind of thing, nothing else.
The
really
attack on Pearl Harbor.
the attack on Pearl Harbor. Yeah,
focus.
Of course, yeah.
The attack on Pearl Harbor is a big focus of
Attack of Pearl
history.
Harbor, then storming the beaches at Normandy, and then that's it.
The civil rights movement after that.
Civil rights movement, yeah,
we learned
but still,
we
it's
learned a lot about in school. But anyway, so needless to say, there's a lot that we didn't learn, and there's some things that when I was looking them up, I can see, okay, this was a significant and interesting event, but you're only at school for so long, I mean, when you're a kid it seems like it's forever, but really it's not forever, and in some of these topics they take weeks and months of time to teach, and you have to test about it, and you have to projects you're working on about these different things and stuff, and so it's like they can't fit in every detail of history.
Obviously not. No, I mean, that would be a monumental task. I mean, even just doing like a 4-year course at university solely on history.
Yeah.
You're majoring in history, whatever, and minoring in other history.
So I think when I was looking up events that happened that we were not taught, I was kind of focusing on things that sort of had to do with things that we were taught, but that change the things that we were taught. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, these things are what actually happened, and so they make what we were taught not a lie, but a little bit different. They make you look at what we were taught in a different way. So the first thing that I noted down, and I got these from Best Life or something like that.
Living your best life.
I'll see
living
if
your
I can
best
find
historical life.
I'll see if I can find it at the end, like while I'm talking or while you're talking or something. There were several things. I just picked out the ones that were sort of a little bit more major of events that I could think of. So the first thing was that the Quakers were actually the first people in America to protest against slavery. And they did so in the 17th century.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, long before, so this, I'm reading directly from this article now. Long before the civil rights protests of the 19th and 20th centuries, Quakers were pointing out the evils of slavery in the latter half of the 17th century. In fact, the very first organized protest against slavery in America was written by Quakers in 1688. According to Bryn Mawr College. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Bryn Mawr, yeah.
Bryn Mawr.
Bryn Mawr, yeah, Mawr.
In their written protest, the Quakers called for colonists to implement the Golden Rule, which is to treat others how you would like to be treated, in relation to those with different skin colors. Isn't that interesting? You never hear about that.
Well, no.
You think, civil, in school.
You never hear about the Quakers, do you?
Well, no, not so much. I mean, I think maybe we
because people go like, oh no, Quaker Oats, the guys who made Quaker Oats. It's like
people do that, do they?
Yes, people do that because it's like that's all they associate Quakers with, or some guy who invented porridge oats.
I think we learned about the Quakers in school. Over here, I mean, I don't imagine you would have in Britain because I don't think. Do Quakers exist in Britain?
No, I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure, but I'm sure it has roots over there. I mean, they were part of the original Pilgrim. I mean, that's probably why they left England, because it was like persecutions galore.
Yeah. But I just thought that was so interesting. That sort of just changes things slightly, and. You think, nobody started speaking up for the rights of black people in this country until the 1950s. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's not true. There were always people
1950s, they decided they'd had enough, and it was like, no, it was really not.
Yeah.
It's been ever since.
Yeah. Another thing, and there's all kinds of stories like this, but I just chose this one. I mean, if you've ever seen any kind of movie that's based in history, modern movie that's based in history, I really feel like they're trying to tell more of these stories.
They're trying to tell more
truths about history.
More truths.
Yeah.
And not like Mel Gibson and Braveheart and all that kind of stuff, you know.
Not whitewashing history quite as much, you know.
Yeah.
Because...
Or The Patriot.
There were black soldiers in the American Revolution. Lo and behold.
Lo and behold, of course there were.
I mean, of course there were.
Yeah.
But they don't ever make that known when you're in school.
It's all white people who are white heroes.
I'm going to say that they didn't when I was in school in a small town in the Texas Panhandle. Maybe they did in other people's schools. And maybe they do more recently now. I mean,
I went to kind of a provincial school in Devon, so it was all very provincial.
And again, I'll quote from the article. There are plenty of stories in history books detailing the efforts of white soldiers during the American Revolution, but are you familiar with the roles of black soldiers? According to Edwin Ayers, a historian at the American Revolution Museum at Yorktown, by the end of the Revolutionary War, between 5,000 and 8,000 free and enslaved black men had served in some capacity. Unfortunately, some of their efforts were done under the expectation that a democratic revolution might offer them freedom. At one point, every state above the Potomac River recruited slaves for military service, typically in exchange for their freedoms. Rhode Island's Black Battalion, established when the state couldn't meet its quota for the Continental Army in 1778, it was even present at the Battle of Yorktown. According to multiple accounts, one observer called them the most neatly dressed, the best under arms, and the most precise in its maneuvers. And it's just like,
yeah.
You know, they fought in the Civil War as well.
Well, yeah, of course they did.
You know, but
they signed up because it was like, you know, they were freed from their slave owners.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, go make a life for yourself north of the border, you know, whatever, north of Dixie.
Yeah.
You know, of the Dixie line.
Mm.
And it's like, I don't know what to do. It's like, well, come with us and, you know, we'll get you signed up and, you know, 3 square meals a day and, you know, fighting for your country, you know?
Yeah. Another interesting fact that we're not taught in school is that the first woman to stand up against a segregated public transit system was in 1855. Jennings Graham. A century before Rosa Parks resisted bus segregation in 1955, Elizabeth Jennings Graham, a free woman living in New York City, became one of the first black women to ride a whites-only horse-drawn streetcar in 1855.
And that caused uproar.
Well, Jennings Graham boarded the streetcar but was forcibly removed by a police officer. In response, she sued and was awarded $225 in damages.
That was a small fortune back then.
As a result, the Brooklyn Circuit of the New York State Supreme Court ruled that black people could not be excluded from public transit, and after a decade of protests and similar lawsuits, New York's public transit services were fully desegregated in 1865. Fully desegregated by 1865. Jennings Graham is the woman who won the right to ride in New York City, but few know her name. That's so awesome.
I mean, the whole thing with Rosa Parks,
Rosa Parks wasn't even the first one
to do that
on that bus system.
Yeah, on that bus system.
There was like a 15-year-old girl who also had done it.
I think she did it like a week before or something.
Yeah, a few months before.
But it's like she doesn't get recognition for it until now. You know, it's like, oh, it's just all Rosa Parks because I guess Rosa made a bigger fuss about it.
Because why? Yeah, it's just because the powers that be chose to make her the example, the face of that. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like, I can understand that this was like a thing in New York City, and you know, if you ask a lot of people around the country, New York City is not America. New York and LA are not America, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
You know, the things that happen and the way they are in those cities is like not representative of the rest of the United States. But it's very awesome to me that someone in the 1800s, you know, when slavery was still a thing, just not where she was living, had the balls to, like, go, no, why can't I ride this? You know, like, why?
Yeah.
and they were just like, oh, yeah, I guess so. I guess why is the right, yeah.
Yeah, why can't you ride that? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just get you riding that. Let's get you sorted out.
Yeah, yeah. And so they're just like, oh, yeah, I didn't know why you can't ride that, actually. I guess you can. Yeah. The 1918 influenza epidemic. I don't think I'd heard of it until COVID happened. And they started bringing it up.
The Spanish flu.
Oh, yeah, exactly. The Spanish flu. It's like, even back then, it was politicized. They had to put a name on it as to where it came from. It couldn't just be the flu. You know what I mean? Like a weird strain of the flu.
Came from the Spanish.
Yeah. Oh, it had to be the Spanish flu, like they're doing now with COVID. But yeah, despite the fact that the 1918 influenza epidemic was one of the worst pandemics in recent history, many schools have only lightly, if at all, spoken of its effects on the American people. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the 1918 epidemic killed about 675,000 people in the United States and millions more in countries around the world. In 1 week in October of that year, almost 5,000 people died in Philadelphia alone. Historians guess that the pandemic was largely forgotten due to the fact that it coincided with World War I, and that's probably the reason it skipped over in history class too. But regardless, it led to more sanitary practices and the race for a vaccine, which was eventually invented in 1938.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I had heard of the Spanish flu.
I'd heard it called the Spanish flu.
Maybe, yeah, but
the Spanish influenza.
Did we learn about it
why,
in school, though?
Why it was called that. Why it was
maybe that strain was found first over there. I mean, yeah, we don't know because we didn't learn about it in school. It's like we'll have to look it up if we want to know. This one was so. I mean, prohibition is another big thing that we learn in schools over here.
Chicago bootlegger.
The period of prohibition. Yeah, we are taught that happened, you know. But we were not taught that the government poisoned people during prohibition.
Oh, yeah.
What, you knew about this?
I vaguely... they were doing something like to the alcohol or something, weren't they?
Yes.
To stop people drinking.
As you probably learned in school, from 1920 to 1933, the U.S. government outlawed the consumption of alcohol by placing a nationwide constitutional ban on the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcohol. But soon, a booming black market emerged and people began drinking redistilled industrial alcohol instead. Here's the thing you probably didn't learn. To curb that black market, government regulatory agencies encouraged measures that made industrial alcohol undrinkable, including the addition of lethal chemicals. According to their...
They're putting cleaning fluid or something
According to their estimates, nearly 10,000 people died due to the poisoning.
And I was like, and those are the dangers of drink. And it's like they only had one glass.
Probably.
And they're bloody dead.
Unbelievable.
It's like, oh, the demon drink, it got that person. It's like, well, considering he never had a drink before in his life and he only had one glass and then dropped dead, I don't think it was the drink.
Yeah.
I don't think he was an alcoholic.
I never in my life, until I was looking this up and read that.
So that's why they had to go to like smuggling and importing and bootlegging from like Britain and, you know, the Europe and stuff, you know, because it's just kind of
they
like...
couldn't trust what
they couldn't trust what they were what the government was doing. And then they were taxing it.
Unbelievable. 10,000 people killed
Probably
10,000 of their own people.
They could have got a lot more with it too.
Jeez.
If only they'd had the time.
Yeah, I mean, I never in my life heard of that.
And if it wasn't for those pesky kids.
There was also things like, and again, these are all things that, in my opinion, are our own horrible histories, you know.
Horrible histories,
like the internment of Asian Americans during
the World War II.
Yeah. I don't think I learned that in school. I don't remember learning it in school. I think I learned it when we were talking about it in school. I think I learned about it outside of school.
Yeah.
And we asked the teacher then in class, you know, because it's just like, And they're like, oh, yeah, that happened.
Oh, yeah, that happened.
And you're just kind of like, what? Why are you not telling me that?
Oh,
like,
well,
we're talking about the war
talking
right
about
now.
it right now.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
The Zoot Suit riots. Have you ever heard of those? I've heard of those. I had heard of those. I didn't have any idea what they were about, though. We certainly didn't learn it in school. So Zoot Suits were what the kids wore in the 1940s, early 1940s. You know, they were the big, baggy, wide jackets, wide pants, and everything. And I say kids, I mean like
and the kids were stick thin.
Late teens,
it's like
early
they wouldn't be
20s.
so wide and baggy now.
Late teens, early 20s. So what happened apparently is soldiers started beating these young kids up. I'll quit calling them kids. These young adults. They started beating them up, just beating them to bloody pulps in the street, like ripping their clothes off of them, leaving them naked on the sidewalk and stuff. The police were not involved in that way. They would stand and watch it happen and then arrest the ones who had been beaten up and stripped of their clothes.
Yeah.
The soldiers' reason at the time was because there was a war on and they were using too much fabric in those suits. As if they had made those suits themselves, you know. I mean, what?
Yeah.
But it just so happened that they were all black and brown people.
Yeah.
Who the fashion trend was popular with.
It was any excuse.
Yeah. So it was really a race thing. They were using
any
the war.
Bloody excuse.
They were using the war as an excuse, though.
But there was no excuse.
And another, just absolutely to end on probably one of the most horrific things that I just learned about very recently and found completely weird because I grew up in the Texas Panhandle and Tulsa, Oklahoma is very close by, was the what is known as, oh my gosh, the Tulsa Massacre. So apparently there was I guess it was in Tulsa, a town in the early 1900s or a district of the town that became very popular amongst black people. Black people were moving there. They were owning businesses, operating businesses. They were gaining a lot of wealth. They were wearing very fashionable clothes. Like they had nice houses and everything. Like they were living the life that black people elsewhere in the country could not do at that time in history. And the KKK caught wind of it. It only lasted for a couple decades. KKK caught wind of it. They basically burnt the whole district down, and hundreds of people were killed and thousands of homes were destroyed, and they never teach that in American history.
Well, no.
And
that's a bad thing. And the KKK is a bad thing, and we don't want to teach bad things. It's like, well,
disgusting.
no, it just needs to be taught, and it needs to be because it's like, you know, you're teaching this history, and I mean, it's relatively recent history for America. Most of it is, though.
Yeah.
200 years is quite relevant. You know, we skipped 200 years in African history in Britain.
Yeah.
To get to, like, the good bit, you know?
Yeah, well.
He's like, oh, the good, it was those 200 years, like, there's nothing going on, and it was kind of boring, really. We're just losing everything, you know?
What's that quote? Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah. Those who don't remember it.
Just to let you guys know, the article that I was reading those first historical points from, the website is called bestlifeonline.com.
Best Life Online.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry we sped through that. We're a bit over time, so we got to wrap it up. Hope you enjoyed that, found it interesting. At least let us know some of the things that you learned after school.
Yeah, because I learned a lot after school.
Oh gosh. I learned
I learned about things like the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, the Indian Ocean.
Learned about a place called Texas.
Yeah. Didn't even know that existed before I met you.
Let us know some things that you were not taught in school that you have since learned and were surprised to find out. Other than that, we appreciate you tuning in. Yeah. Thank you for your support, as always. And we will talk to you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.